Just wanted to say that I think Michelle got a good taste of graduate school in doing this project, and the reason I say she got a good taste of graduate school, and by the way, she is heading off to Boston College next year to a graduate program, so we're very proud of her for that, is that she doggedly bugged a lot of us to do an excellent job. I saw her this morning in Susan Denise's office going over statistics and going over continuous versus discontinuous variables and things that even make my head spin. And she just kept bugging all of us. She bugged me and asked for early morning meetings, and that's sort of what graduate school is like. You sort of have to be extremely assertive and to get your work done. So I have no doubt that Michelle's going to do a great job in graduate school. This work on the connection of divorce and violence is important, and I think she's picked an important topic. It's actually out of my area of expertise, but I've learned a lot as I've watched Michelle do this work. So we're proud of you for all of your accomplishments. We know you're going to present this paper at an international conference in a few weeks, and so I introduce to you this year's honors student, Michelle Corf.
Okay, so I'm Michelle. Welcome. Thank you everybody for coming. Like Professor Wunkowitz said, my study is on how divorce correlates with violence. A little bit of background on what I'll be going over through this presentation. I'll start with my hypothesis. Actually, there's a couple. And then I'll do background information and how I came up with this idea for this research. Then I'll move on to the materials that were used, participants, and ending with results. My hypothesis for this whole study was that parental divorce creates violence in the children that are involved. This research is strictly about the effects of divorce on the children that are involved, and not on the reasons for the divorce. So it's really about the children, not about the parents. The other hypothesis that I had was that participants of divorced parents show more violent acts than participants of non-divorced parents. And the following previous research is how I kind of had these hypotheses. Larson, Lawson, and Sawyers in 1999 found that children of divorced parents have greater use of mental health services, drug and alcohol use, early sexual activity, delinquency, and school performance. As evidenced by these studies, there's been extensive research that parental divorce impacts the children that are involved in the divorce. I'll mainly be focusing on delinquency and how that relates to violence. When it comes to divorce, there's a range in the type of divorce. There's high conflict, and at the lower spectrum there's amicable divorces. Studies have shown that when children are exposed to more amicable divorces, they have fewer adjustment problems than with higher conflict divorces, which cause children to externalize both behavioral and emotional problems. Along with this concept of the amicable versus high conflict divorces, it's shown that studies have shown that children seem to fare better if the divorce is more high conflict. However, it still bestows lasting inner effects. If the conflict is still amicable, it still leaves lasting effects on the children. It's also been proven that even pleasant mutual divorces leave lasting effects on the children. Hardy and Laszloffy published a book entitled Teens Who Hurt, and this was a major influence for my research. I was given this book in my counseling class with Linda Baker, and it really made me really think about this and how these correlate with divorce. They created a 4-factor model, starting with devaluation. This is seen in divorce because children may hold themselves accountable for their parents' divorce or their fighting. Disruption of community is obviously seen. The family dynamic changes. It could cause the family to have to move, change schools, which brings on a whole nother set of emotions that could turn into violence. Dehumanization of loss is repeated instances of not acknowledging the pain that comes with the loss of the divorce. And if this isn't humanized at all by the parents, by teachers, anybody involved with the children, this could cause the children to take part in violent acts. Rage is the last factor, and it's the culmination of all the 3 previous factors. Everybody has the potential to have rage, and rage increases as the 3 factors previously aren't acknowledged or, taken, if they're not addressed, then it can cause more rage, which could cause violent acts within themselves, the child itself, or towards others. What was measured in this study was the youth self-report is a pre-existing questionnaire that deals with 8 different categories. I chose 3, which are presented here, that relate to violence. I also made 2 categories myself that deal with self-inflicted violence, which I talked about previously. The participants that were involved were all Keene State College students. Most of them were psych majors. All participation was voluntary. I was pleased with the number of participants, which is represented in N. I thought I got a lot of participation, and I was very happy with that number. I would have liked there to be a smaller range between females and males, but I still got great results with gender, regardless of the gap there. The average age seen is about 19 and a half. The range was 18 to 42, but the 42-year-old was a complete outlier, so 19 and a half was a little above that was the average. A questionnaire was given to every participant in this study, and the following are, what was asked, the general, age, gender, marital status, if applicable, along with the age of divorce, the relationship range. I'll discuss that next. And then following all of those was the youth self-report questions and the questions I designed as well. So, the parental rating. Each questionnaire had 3 different rating scales on them, and this was what I was talking about before with the amicable and high conflict divorces. 1 being amicable and 10 being high conflict. So, like I said, there was 3 different scales. So if you have divorced parents, you would answer the first 2. The first one being pre-divorce, the second being post-divorce. And if your parents were still together, you would rate your parents' relationship just as an overall rating that you would give them. As seen, I supported it. This supports my hypothesis with pre-divorce would have the highest rating, and then it got better with post-divorce, but still the rating of the non-divorced parents the mean was lower. Here are the averages that compare divorce and non-divorce. The divorce is seen in the orange, and non-divorce is seen in the lighter orange color. All of them, with the exception of cutting, the participants with divorced parents had higher averages, mean scores, than participants with non-divorced parents. Even though there's 4 out of these 5 categories, only 2 of them had significant differences, statistically speaking. I ran several independent t-tests. The quasi-independent variables were parental marital status, which is the divorce versus the non-divorce, and the dependent variables being depression, rule-breaking behavior, aggressive behavior, cutting, and suicide attempts, which were the precursors that I used in this study for violence. It's shown here, as you can see, that depression and aggressive behavior both have significant differences when it comes to marital status. This means that if a child has divorced parents, they'll be more depressed and aggressive than children that don't have divorced parents, that have parents that are still together. I ran a 2x2 ANOVA with the quasi-independent variables being pre- and post-divorce ratings and gender. The dependent variables were the same 5 precursors. When focusing solely on the participants with divorced parents, which is shown here, there was an interaction found between gender and pre- and post-divorce. So this means that pre- and post-divorce ratings were different when it came to males and females. Depression, aggression, cutting, and suicide attempts had a higher prevalence after parental divorce, with males having higher scores at the 0.05 significance level, and rule breaking was the same, just at the 0.01 significance level. This further supported my hypothesis that precursors to violence increase after parental divorce, and that males have higher scores, meaning that they're more depressed, more apt to do rule-breaking things, etc. Another 2x2 ANOVA was run here, this time the quasi-independent variable being gender and marital status, so divorced or non-divorced, and the dependent variables being rule-breaking and aggressive behavior. I found that there was an interaction between gender and rule-breaking and aggressive behavior. This means that regardless of the parents' marital status, or regardless if the parents are divorced or not, males are more apt to break rules and be more aggressive than females are. This last one that I ran, the 2x2 ANOVA, The quasi-independent variable was gender and divorce status, which is the levels of pre- and post-divorce. And the dependent variable of the parental conflict rating was measured. Pre- and post-divorce ratings were shown to interact with gender at the 0.05 level of significance, shown here. And here is a graph of this to kind of make it a little bit more clear. So this means that even though, as you can see on the right for pre-divorce, they're pretty much the same as they rated their parents' relationships, but males were more sensitive to the change of the parents' relationship, as you can see with the steeper slope of the males. This shows in the lower ratings of the post-divorce after the parental divorce, meaning that males viewed their parents' relationship as being lower conflict after the divorce than females did. There was no interaction found between the age of children at the time of the divorce and the 5 different precursors to violence, the depression, rule breaking, etc. This was the only part that I had not predicted, the only thing that was not supported by my hypothesis. I thought that the lower the age, the more violent acts there would be, but that was not shown. But I do think this was partially due to the small number of participants with divorced parents. I think if I had a higher sample size, I might have found something a little different. In conclusion, my hypothesis was supported. This hypothesis is that the parental divorce does have an impact on violence in the children that are involved, as well as divorced parents, kids with divorced parents show more violent behaviors than children with non-divorced parents, and this was all supported by the data. Research did show that divorce does have an impact on children and can cause violence. However, this does not mean that every child that has divorced parents will become violent. I would like to thank some people. As Professor Welkwood said, I will be going to an international conference in Hawaii, so I'd like to thank the Science Division, the Psych Department, Academic Affairs, Student Affairs, and the KSC Conference Fund. I'd also like to thank Professor Clark, Professor Moniz, Professor Scholey, and Professor Baker for helping me on this project. Thank you to my parents and my friends for their unconditional support, and the most thanks to Professor Welkowitz, who I would not have done this project without his knowledge and support. None of it would have been possible or successful. So, thank you. Are there any questions?